Welcome to the Devonport Camera Club's Projected Images 3 competition results. The club's entries were judged by Glenda Worley. Glenda has provided insightful comments on the individual images, and this generosity is greatly appreciated. Glenda has also included a portfolio of some of her own award-winning images, which will be shown at the end of this presentation. Thank you, Glenda. I know from experience how difficult the Hagia Sophia is to photograph, and by concentrating on the ceiling, you would have eliminated any people under those lights. Unfortunately, cameras cannot as yet capture the dynamic image our eyes can see, and there are many blown highlights. The image is sharp with good detail in the shadows. With scenes like this, you really need to shoot a couple of exposures and blend them in post-production. The image would also look better with the bottom right corner pulled down to straighten the lights. This is a nice composition with an interesting and colourful foreground fitting to the nut centred in the background. The tones in the sky complement the foreground tones, and it's a pity that there is one blown bright area. If your software allows, you could select that area and paint in some colour slightly lighter than the tones around it. The image has been over-sharpened with visible artifacts in the sand and halos around many edges. Redoing the processing with more subtle hand would be worth the effort. There is a visible watermark on this image, which in most competitions would mean immediate disqualification. The image has been well composed, with the bridge leading into the image and the two large rock formations forming an impressive background. There are some circular light areas in the sky which would be better removed. The image is sharp with good contrast, but the composition isn't strong. Perhaps shooting further down and facing left, the rocks could lead the eyes into the image. The little boat in the midground and the shore in the background would have been stronger. Oftentimes, less is more. As presented, the image has a crooked horizon which should always be straight. You have filled the frame with your subject and the foreground is super sharp, but the open cut, which is the subject, appears much softer. If your software allows, select only the open cut. Use a curves layer and click on the darkish area and a lighter area and create a subtle S-curve. This would make it appear much stronger and, if necessary, use luminosity blend mode so it doesn't oversaturate the reds. The image is sharp with good texture in both the timber and foliage, and the red dress immediately draws the viewer's eyes. Filling the frame with the subject ensures that there are no distractions. Selective colour isn't as popular as it was previously, and with the bright red dress you probably could have left the image in full colour, or maybe just slightly desaturated everything else. The rather sad face and the drool coming from the mouth make me think that the bull has just finished his part in the performance. It can't be very pleasant experience for the bulls. Your choice of aperture has blurred the background well and, together with the subject filling the frame, has helped minimize distractions. You could reduce the strength of the reds in the background as they tend to draw the eye away from the subject. This is a nice shot of the two generations, and it was a good choice to fill the frame. The background is blurred and darkened to make the subjects stand out. Perhaps done in post, as the edges of the hat appear blurry, and there are some areas of the girl's hair showing brighter tones in the background. The skin tones appear a little too red, and reducing the red in the skin would help. Great eye contact. The couple have been well placed in the frame, are sharp, and composition is good. The skin tones are just a little too red, particularly the man's face. You've done a fairly good job of selecting the subject to replace the background, thus removing any distractions. There is an area between the two heads which you have missed, and a couple of white areas under the man's lower hand and on the edge of the lady's t-shirt and shorts. Good composition with the water leading through the image and the tree on the left providing a strong frame. You could pull the saturation back a little. It also appears to be a bit over-sharpened, and there are visible halos around the reflected branches in the lower third. A pleasing composition with the water leading to the little rock pool with the ocean behind. The tones in the ocean are beautiful, but the colour of the sky appears a little dull and not a complementary colour to the rest of the image. The rocks appear crunchy, and you could pull back on the sharpening a little. A nicely composed image with the chimney well placed in the frame. The swirling clouds add interest to the sky, but the blues are a little too strong, and you could desaturate and raise the luminance of that colour. The foreground looks a little crunchy, and you could reduce the sharpening in that area. You have captured a sharp splash with a pleasing shape, vibrant colours, and the more pastel tones in the base contrast nicely. It was a good choice to place the splash in the centre, as the base balances it well. You could remove the highlight dots in the two balls and possibly lighten the shadow in the green one so it doesn't disappear into the background. I don't know if this is the same photographer as Early Morning at Kuta Rocks, but this is a much stronger composition. The rocks across the lower frame, the boat, a strong local point, and the interesting structure in the background provides an image with more impact. Moving more to the left, if possible, could have eliminated the house, which is more of a distraction than adding to the story. A good storytelling image and the casual stance of the child with lifted foot works well. The layers of bank, water, reeds and trees adds interest, but the building top left is a distraction. If there was another to the right, perhaps shooting portrait orientation could eliminate it. It is a pity that the tip of the rod disappears into the trees, and if you could direct the pose, ask the child to lower it. It does resemble a long-legged bird. The splash is nice and sharp, and the sky makes an attractive background. You could lighten the tones in the body a little to make it pop more. There is a halo between the liquid and the sky, which would be better removed. What a happy face, and the diagonal placement of the subject in the frame works well. The eyes are sharp, with catch lights which immediately attract the viewer's eyes. The shadow on the background wall mid-left frame is distracting and could be removed. Good capture. The duckling is sharp with good feather detail, the eye is sharp with a catchlight, and you've caught it covered in water droplets with its partially open beak in the water. The colour tones throughout the image are lovely, and your choice of aperture has nicely blurred the background. Excellent composition with the large dominant flower well positioned in the frame and the sharpness falling off, giving a good sense of depth. The light through the petals of the large flower is beautiful, but perhaps lift the shadows just a little to see more detail in the back of it. The colour looks natural, and it's good you didn't go overboard with the saturation. I feel a certain tension when looking at this image, as most of the flowers haven't seemed to realise that the sun is behind them. The bull is sharp with great eye contact, good detail and caught mid-stride. I would like just a little more room around it, particularly at the bottom, as it appears a little cramped in the frame. The colour tones are pleasing and the background nicely blurred. Your choice of aperture has given a feeling of movement in the water, which is well exposed and nicely placed in the frame. The surrounding rocks are colourful, with good detail, and that tree fern at the top provides another point of interest. The image does appear to be leaning down to the right. The lighter areas at the top tend to draw the eye up and out of the frame, and you could easily use the remove tool, or cloning, to cover them. Cropping some of those loose rocks from the bottom and making it an 8x10 crop would make the waterfall more prominent and the image appear wider. Another artistic presentation. The dragonfly is perfectly sharp, and the complementary colours of red and green work well. Putting the subject on the black background ensures that there are no distractions. You couldn't use this in a nature section, but that heavy saturation has a certain appeal. The walkway provides a good leading line into and through the image and provides an area for the eyes to rest. The depth of field helps give depth to the image and the sharpness gradually falling off. There is some purple fringing upper right which should be removed in post-production. This is a stunning landscape with lovely light and shadows and has been well composed. The background, which is darker, has pleasing tones. The midground appears a little too garish and the greens too lime in appearance. Reducing the yellows a little would help. The tones in the foreground reflection are almost identical to the midground and therefore blend together too much. As a general rule, reflection should be slightly darker and less saturated than the area they are reflecting. A well-presented image with the dark twig and leaves framing the spray of orchids, which are beautifully lit. The flowers are sharp with pleasing colours and stand out well against the soft, muted background. A great close-up of this bird, which is sharp where it needs to be, with great feather detail in the head and chest. The dark tones of the background add a richness to the image and allow the bird to really stand out. The way its tail has fanned out in the water, together with the gradual falling off of the sharpness, results in a more three-dimensional image. A very well composed image with the water leading the eye to the waterfall and good colour tones throughout. Your choice of shutter speed has slowed the water while still leaving detail there to show movement. Just a smidgen too much sharpening, with haloing visible on the rocks to the right of the falls. Having the subject fill the frame was a good choice, and the sparks are super sharp. The saturation is a little too much, and lowering it and perhaps lowering the luminance of the yellows would give a more balanced appearance. A very artistic presentation. Serendipity has given you an odd number of leaves, which is more pleasing to the human eye, and you have captured a spider. The image is sharp, where it needs to be, and the softer sections under the murky water add depth. Creating art with the aid of your camera. Well done. A beautiful image. It is sharp without losing the delicate appearance of the little fungi. Your choice of aperture has blurred the background nicely, and the moisture of the subject adds another point of interest. A beautiful image of this bird appearing to admire itself in the reflection. The composition is strong, with the timber leading the eye to the bird, and the subject and its reflection forming a pleasing shape. It is sharp with great detail in the feathers, and the dark tones of the surrounds help accentuate the bird. The composition is reasonably strong, with the dead tree leading the eye towards the hut. Cropping down and in from the upper right corner, bringing the right side to the edge of the fence, would make the hut larger in the frame. You could make the hut pop more with added texture or clarity and contrast, making sure you don't block the blacks in that area. You could also add extra contrast to the tufted grass in the foreground and also the sky, which is at present a little light and tends to draw the eye away from the subject. The daisies themselves stand out well with their brighter tone. The image would benefit from a slight straightening, as it appears to drop down to the right. To make the image really pop, you could darken the background more. By selecting the background, you could paint with black at 100% over the top area, eliminating those lighter patches, and then reduce the opacity and darken the tabletop more. As presented, those light patches above distract, and the patterned tablecloth and light napkins compete too much with the subject. The diagonal placement of Ella is good, but the very crooked background is jarring. The face needs more light on it, especially the eyes. You could possibly lighten the exposure on the girl only in post. However, there is already visible noise in the photo, and this would accentuate that. The subject itself provides the leading line to draw the eyes through the image to the curved body of the guitar, with the fretboard appearing like a little bridge. You could pull the highlights back a little and raise the shadows to show more of the tuning pegs. There are some white dots visible in the black background, which would be better removed. A well-composed image and a good choice to shoot from the rear, which is different from how most would choose to shoot it. You've framed the church well with the foliage, and the subject is sharp and well detailed. Unfortunately, there are obvious halos around the church and the trees at the sides, which spoil the presentation of this image. You've handled the black and white conversion well, with a good range of tones. The sky looks a little too contrasty, and dehazing it would create a softer appearance and provide some separation between it and the buildings. There is also a dust spot visible in the sky above the right-hand wall, which should be removed. The most interesting part of this image is the middle, with the door and window, and cropped to 8 by 10 with the door on the right third would give a much stronger image. Sometimes less is more. This is a well-composed image with the path and bridge leading from the lower left to the house above. It is unfortunate the sky is so light, as it draws the eyes and therefore the attention away from the subject. Some subtle dodging of the snow in the foreground could really accentuate it. What a great storytelling image, which I'm sure resonates with viewers who have done something similar at that age. You could raise the exposure of the boy only, as his face and shirt are a little dark. Just be careful not to blow the whites in those sneakers. Cropping the left into the edge of the gutter on the bottom edge would give a stronger composition. The simplicity of the composition is wonderful, and having the subjects placed centrally was a good choice. The image is sharp, but you could afford a little extra sharpening to the eye. There is some pure white on the bird, but you could raise the midtones a little and make them a touch brighter. The subject is sharp and detailed, but needs a little more breathing room. The tones in the building are good, but the blacks in the background are a little too heavy. Your conversion to black and white has been well handled, with tones from black to white. The rocks anchor the shot, and the boat has room to move into. Shooting this from a slightly lower position would have placed the boat's aerials above, rather than on, the horizon line. You have captured a good pose with the mouth wide open, and the little devil is sharp against an out-of-focus background. You have pushed the range of tones just a little too far, with the teeth looking a little too bright, and areas of the black fur losing all detail. Sharp, and you've handled the shiny bodywork well, with it retaining its shiny appearance without lots of blown highlights. The symmetry is almost perfect, but you could remove that area above the left tail light so its appearance matches the right. The car needs a little more room around it, particularly at the top, although if shot at a car show, shooting so tight is fully understandable. An interesting collection of objects, which I'm sure tell the creator an important story. Compositionally, it works except for the little section of paper on the top, which needs to be either more in or totally out. The watch face and other areas of the background are bright and tend to draw the eye away from the man. Lighten him, being careful not to blow the highlights on his face, and darken the lighter areas in the background, making him the star and the background the support cast. A good storytelling image which is sharp. Whilst the tones are reasonably good, you could also pull the highlights in the sky down as their brightness tends to draw the eyes up and out of the frame. In regards to composition, moving slightly to the left would have created just a little separation between the bike and the barrel. The guy with the crossed arms in the background adds interest, and I'm still trying to work out whether he is glowering at the riders or having a doze. This image ticks a lot of boxes. The water is a leading line to the bridge. The dark rocks frame the lower section. It is sharp, and your black and white conversion has a good range of tones. The mist softens the background, creating a good sense of depth. Yes, the sky is light, but the bridge stands out so well against it, and your eyes tend to lock onto it. Nicely captured and processed.